Thank you. Good morning. I'm New York's Attorney General Eric Schneiderman. I thank you for joining us here today for what we believe and hope will mark a significant milestone in our collective efforts to deal with the problem of climate change and put our heads together and put our offices together to try and take the most coordinated approach yet undertaken by states to deal with this most pressing issue of our time. I want to thank my co-convener of the conference, Vermont Attorney General William Sorrell, who has been helping joining us here and been instrumental in making today's events possible, and my fellow attorneys general for making the trip to New York for this announcement. Many of them have been working for years on different aspects of this problem to try and preserve our planet and reduce the carbon emissions that threaten all of the people we represent. And I'm very proud to be here today with Attorney General George Jepsen of Connecticut, Attorney General Brian Frosh of Maryland, Attorney General Maura Healey of Massachusetts, Attorney General Mark Herring of Virginia, and Attorney General Claude Walker of the U.S. Virgin Islands. We also have staff representing other attorneys general from across the country, including Attorney General Kamala Harris of California, Matt Dehn of Delaware, Carl Racine of the District of Columbia, Lisa Madigan of Illinois, Tom Miller of Iowa, Janet Mills of Maine, Lori Swanson of Minnesota, Hector Balderas of New Mexico, Ellen Rosenblum of Oregon, Peter Kilmartin of Rhode Island, and Bob Ferguson of Washington. And finally, I want to extend my severe thanks to Vice President Al Gore for joining us. It has been almost 10 years since he galvanized the world's attention on climate change with his documentary, An Inconvenient Truth. And I think it's fair to say that no one in American public life, either during or beyond their time in elective office, has done more to elevate the debate about climate change or to expand global awareness about the urgency of the need for collective action on climate change than Vice President Gore. So it's truly an honor to have you here with us today. So we've gathered here today for a conference, the first of its kind conference of attorneys general dedicated to coming up with creative ways to enforce laws being flouted by the fossil fuel industry and their allies in their short-sighted efforts to put profits above the interests of the American people and the integrity of our financial markets. This conference reflects our commitment to work together in what is really an unprecedented multi-state effort in the area of climate change. Now, we have worked together on many matters before, and I am pleased to announce that many of the folks represented here were on the amicus brief we submitted to the United States Supreme Court in the Friedrichs versus California Teachers Association case. We just got the ruling that there was a 4-4 split, so the American labor movement survives to fight another day. And thanks to all for that effort at collaboration. It shows what we can do if we work together, and today we're here spending a day to ensure that this most important issue facing all of us, the future of our planet, is addressed by a collective of states working as creatively, collaboratively, and aggressively as possible. The group here was really formed when some of us came together to defend the EPA's Clean Power Plan, the new rules on greenhouse gases, and today also marks the day that our coalition is filing our brief in the Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia. In that important matter, we are defending the EPA's rules. There is a coalition of other states on the other side trying to strike down the rules, but the group that started out in that matter together was 18 states in the District of Columbia. We call ourselves the Green 19, but now that Attorney General Walker of the Virgin Islands has joined us, our rhyme scheme is blown. We can't be called the Green 19, so now we're the Green 20. We'll come up with a better name at some point. But ladies and gentlemen, we're here for a very simple reason. We have heard the scientists. We know what's happening to the planet. There is no dispute, but there is confusion, and confusion sowed by those with an interest in profiting from the confusion and creating misperceptions in the eyes of the American public that really need to be cleared up. The U.S. Defense Department, no radical agency, recently called climate change an urgent and growing threat to our national security. We know that last month, February, was the furthest above normal from any month in history since 1880 when they started keeping meteorological records. The facts are evident. People have not, this is not a problem 10 years or 20 years in the future. People in New York who saw what happened with the additional storm surge with Superstorm Sandy, we know the water level in New York Harbor is almost a foot higher than it was. The New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, not some radical agency, predicts that if we continue at this pace, we'll have another 1.5 feet of water in New York Harbor. It'll go up by that much by 2050. So today, in the face of the gridlock in Washington, we are assembling a group of state actors to send the message that we are prepared to step into this breach. And one thing we hope all reasonable people can agree on is that every fossil fuel company has a responsibility to be honest with its investors and with the public about the financial and market risks posed by climate change. These are cornerstones of our securities and consumer protection laws. My office reached a settlement last year based on the enforcement of New York securities laws with Peabody Energy, and they agreed to rewrite their financials because they'd been misleading investors and the public about the threat to their own business plan and about the fact that they had very detailed analysis telling them how the price of coal would be going down in the face of actions taken by governments around the world, but they were hiding it from their investors. So they agreed to revise all of their filings with the SEC, and the same week we announced that, we announced that we had served a subpoena on ExxonMobil pursuing that and other theories related to consumer and securities fraud. So we know, because of what's already out there in the public, that there are companies using the best climate science. They're using the best climate models so that when they spend shareholder dollars to raise their oil rigs, which they are doing, they know how fast the sea level is rising. Then they are drilling in places in the Arctic where they couldn't drill 20 years ago because of the ice sheets. They know how fast the ice sheets are receding. And yet they have told the public for years that there were no competent models. That was the specific term used by an Exxon executive not so long ago. No competent models to project climate patterns, including those in the Arctic. And we know that they paid millions of dollars to support organizations that put out propaganda denying that we can predict or measure the effects of fossil fuel on our climate, or even denying that climate change was happening. There have been those who have raised the question, aren't you interfering with people's First Amendment rights? The First Amendment, ladies and gentlemen, does not give you the right to commit fraud. And we are law enforcement officers. All of us do work. Every attorney general does work on fraud cases. And we are pursuing this as we would any other fraud matter. You have to tell the truth. You can't make misrepresentations of the kinds we've seen here. And the scope of the problem we're facing, the size of the corporate entities and their alliances and trade associations and other groups is massive, and it requires a multi-state effort. So I'm very honored that my colleagues are here today assembling with us. We know that in Washington, there are good people who want to do the right thing on climate change, but everyone from President Obama on down is under a relentless assault from well-funded, highly aggressive, and morally vacant forces that are trying to block every step by the federal government to take meaningful action. So today, we're sending a message that at least some of us, actually a lot of us, in state government are prepared to step into this battle with an unprecedented level of commitment and coordination. Vice President Gore has a very busy schedule. He has been traveling internationally, raising the alarm, but also training climate change activists. He rearranged his schedule so he could be here with us today to meet with my colleagues and I, and there is no one who has done more for this cause, and it is a great pleasure to have him standing shoulder to shoulder with us as we embark on this new round in what we hope will be the beginning of the end of our addiction to fossil fuel and our degradation of the planet. Vice President Al Gore.
Thank you very much, Eric. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Attorney General Schneiderman. It really and truly is an honor for me to join you and your colleagues here, Bill Sorrell of Vermont, Maura Healey of Massachusetts, Brian Frosch of Maryland, Mark Herring of Virginia, George Jepson of Colorado, and Claude Walker from the U.S. Virgin Islands, and the 10, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, how many other, 10 other 11 other state attorneys general offices that were represented in the meetings that took place earlier prior to this press conference. I really believe that years from now, this convening by Attorney General Eric Schneiderman and his colleagues here today may well be looked back upon as a real turning point in the effort to hold to account those commercial interests that have been, according to the best available evidence, deceiving the American people, communicating in a fraudulent way, both about the reality of the climate crisis and the dangers it poses to all of us, and committing fraud in their communications about the viability of renewable energy and efficiency and energy storage that together are posing this great competitive challenge to the long reliance on carbon-based fuels. So I congratulate you, Attorney General, and all of you, and to those Attorneys General who were so impressively represented in the meetings here. This is really, really important. I am a fan of what President Obama has been doing, particularly in his second term on the climate crisis. But it's important to recognize that in the federal system, the Congress has been sharply constraining the ability of the executive branch to fully perform its obligations under the Constitution to protect the American people against the kind of fraud that the evidence suggests is being committed by several of the fossil fuel companies, electric utilities burning coal, and the like. So what these attorneys general are doing is exceptionally important. I remember very well, and I'm not going to dwell on this analogy, but I remember very well from my days in the House and Senate and the White House, the long struggle against the fraudulent activities of the tobacco companies, trying to keep Americans addicted to the deadly habit of smoking cigarettes, and committing fraud to try to constantly hook each new generation of children to replenish their stock of customers who were dying off from smoking-related diseases. And it was a combined effort of the executive branch, and I'm proud that the Clinton-Gore administration played a role in that, but it was a combined effort in which the state attorneys general played the crucial role in securing a historic victory for public health. From the time the tobacco companies were first found out, as evidenced by the historic Attorney General's report of 1964, it took 40 years for them to be held to account under the law. We do not have 40 years to continue suffering the consequences of the fraud allegedly being committed by the fossil fuel companies where climate change is concerned. In brief, there are only 3 questions left to be answered about the climate crisis. The first one is, must we change? Do we really have to change? We rely on fossil fuels for more than 80% of all the energy our world uses. In burning it, we've reduced poverty and raised standards of living and built this elaborate global civilization, and it looks like it'll be hard to change. So naturally, people wonder, do we really have to change? The scientific community has been all but unanimous for a long time now, but now Mother Nature and the laws of physics, harder to ignore than scientists, are making it abundantly clear that we have to change. We're putting 110 million tons of man-made heat-trapping global warming pollution into the thin shell of atmosphere surrounding our planet every day, as if it's an open sewer. And the cumulative amount of that man-made global warming pollution now traps as much extra heat energy in the Earth's system as would be released by 400,000 Hiroshima-class atomic bombs exploding every 24 hours on the surface of our planet. It's a big planet, but that's a lot of energy. And it is the reason why temperatures are breaking records almost every year now. 2015 was the hottest year measured since instruments have been used to measure temperature. 2014 was the second hottest. 14 of the 15 hottest have been in the last 15 years. As the Attorney General mentioned, February continues the trend by breaking all previous records, the hottest in 1,632 months ever measured. Last December 29th, the same unnatural global warming fuel storm system that created record floods in the Midwest went on up to the Arctic, and December 29th, smack in the middle of the polar winter night at the North Pole, temperatures were driven up 50 degrees above the freezing point. So the North Pole started thawing in the middle of the winter night. Yesterday, the announcement came that it's the smallest winter extent of ice ever measured in the Arctic. 93% of the extra heat goes into the oceans of the world, and that has consequences. When Superstorm Sandy headed across the Atlantic toward this city, it crossed areas of the Atlantic that were 9 degrees Fahrenheit warmer than normal, and that's what made that storm so devastating. Sea level had already come up because of the ice melting, principally off Greenland and Antarctica, and as the Attorney General mentioned, that's a process now accelerating. But these ocean-based storms are breaking records now. I just came from the Philippines, where Super Typhoon Haiyan created 4 million homeless people when it crossed much warmer waters of the Pacific. By the way, it was a long plane flight to get here, and I happened to get, just before we took off, the 200-page brief that you all filed in support of the Clean Power Plan. Really excellent work. Footnotes took up a lot of those 200 pages, so I'm not claiming to read all 200 of them. But the same extra heat in the oceans is disrupting the water cycle. We all learned in school that the water vapor comes off the oceans and falls as rain or snow over the land and then rushes back to the ocean. That natural life-giving process is being massively disrupted because the warmer oceans put a lot more water vapor up there. And when storm conditions present themselves, these storms will reach out thousands of kilometers to funnel all that extra humidity and water vapor into these massive record-breaking downpours. And occasionally it creates a snowpocalypse or a snowmageddon, but most often record-breaking floods. We've had 7 once-in-a-thousand-year floods in the last 10 years in the U.S. Just last week in Louisiana and Arkansas, 2 feet of rain in 4 days, coming again with what they call the Maya Express off the oceans. And the same extra heat that's creating these record-breaking floods also pull the soil moisture out of the land and create these longer and deeper droughts all around the world, on every continent. Every night on the news now, it's like a nature hike through the book of Revelation. And we're seeing tropical diseases moving to higher latitudes. The Zika virus. Of course, the transportation revolution has a lot to do with the spread of Zika and dengue fever and chikungunya and diseases I never heard of when I was growing up, and probably most of you never did either. But now they're moving and taking root in the United States. Puerto Rico's part of the United States, by the way, not a state, but part of our nation. 50% of the people in Puerto Rico are estimated to get the Zika virus this year. By next year, 80%. When people who are part of the U.S. territory, when women are advised not to get pregnant, that's something new that ought to capture our attention. And in large areas of Central America and South America, women are advised now not to get pregnant for 2 years until they try to get this brand new viral disease under control. The list of the consequences continues, and I'm not going to go through it all, but the answer to that first question, do we have to change, is clearly now to any reasonable thinking person, yes, we have to change. Now the second question is, can we change? And for quite a few years, I will confess to you that when I answered that question, yes, it was based on the projections of scientists and technologists who said, just wait. We're seeing these exponential curves just begin. Solar's going to win. Wind power is going to get way cheaper. Batteries are going to have their day. We're going to see much better efficiency. Well, now we're seeing these exponential curves really shoot up dramatically. Almost 75% of all the new investment in the U.S. in new generating capacity last year was in solar and wind. More than half worldwide. We're seeing coal companies go bankrupt on a regular basis now. Australia's the biggest coal exporter in the world. They've just the analysis there, they're not going to build any more coal plants because solar and wind are so cheap. And we're seeing this happen all around the world. But there is an effort in the U.S. to slow this down and to bring it to a halt, because part of the group that, again, according to the best available evidence, has been committing fraud in trying to convince people that the climate crisis is not real, are now trying to convince people that renewable energy is not a viable option, and worse than that, they're using their combined political and lobbying efforts to put taxes on solar panels and jigger with the laws to require that installers have to know the serial number of every single part that they're using to put on a rooftop of somebody's house, and a whole series of other phony requirements, unneeded requirements that are simply for the purpose of trying to slow down this renewable revolution. In the opinion of many who have looked at this pattern of misbehavior in what certainly looks like fraud, they are violating the law. If the Congress would actually work, our democracy's been hacked, and that's another story, not the subject of this press conference, but if the Congress really would allow the executive branch of the federal government to work, then maybe this would be taken care of at the federal level. But these brave men and women, who are the attorneys general of the states represented in this historic coalition, are doing their job. And just as many of them did in the tobacco example, they are now giving us real hope that the answer to that third question, will we change, is going to be yes. Because those who are using unfair and illegal means to try to prevent the change are likely now, finally, at long last, to be held to account. And that will remove the last barriers to allow the American people to move forward and to redeem the promise of our president and our country in the historic meeting in Paris last December, where the United States led the global coalition to form the first global agreement that is truly comprehensive. If the United States were to falter and stop leading the way, then there would be no other leader for the global effort to solve this crisis. By taking the action these attorneys general are taking today, It is the best, most hopeful step I can remember in a long time that we will make the changes that are necessary. So I'll conclude my part in this by once again saying congratulations to these public servants for the historic step they're taking today, and on behalf of many people who I think would say it's all right for me to speak for them, I'd like to say thank you.
Thank you very much. And now my other colleagues are going to say a few words. Another great colleague who has done extraordinary work before and since becoming Attorney General, working with our office on incredibly important civil rights issues, financial fraud issues, Massachusetts Attorney General Maura Healey.
Thank you very much, General Snyderman. Thank you, General Snyderman and General Sorrell, for your leadership on this issue. It's an honor for me to be able to stand here today with you, with our colleagues, and certainly with the Vice President, who today, I think, put most eloquently just how important this is, this commitment that we make. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your continuing education. Thank you for your inspiration and your affirmation. You know, as Attorneys General, we have a lot on our plates. Addressing the epidemics of opiate abuse, gun violence, protecting the economic security and well-being of families across this country. All of these issues are so important. But make no mistake about it. In my view, there's nothing we need to worry about more than climate change. It's incredibly serious when you think about the human and the economic consequences, and indeed the fact that this threatens the very existence of our planet. Nothing is more important. Not only must we act, we have a moral obligation to act. That is why we are here today. The science, we do believe in science. We're lawyers, we believe in facts, we believe in information, and as was said, this is about facts and information and transparency. We know from the science and we know from experience the very real consequences of our failure to address this issue. Climate change is and has been for many years a matter of extreme urgency. But unfortunately, it is only recently that this problem has begun to be met with equally urgent action. Part of the problem has been one of public perception. And it appears, certainly, that certain companies, certain industries may not have told the whole story, leading many to doubt whether climate change is real and to misunderstand and misapprehend the catastrophic nature of its impacts. Fossil fuel companies that deceived investors and consumers about the dangers of climate change must be held accountable. That's why I too have joined in investigating the practices of ExxonMobil. We can all see today the troubling disconnect between what Exxon knew, what industry folks knew, and what the company and industry chose to share with investors and with the American public. We're here before you, all committed to combating climate change and to holding accountable those who have misled the public. The states represented here today have long been working hard to sound the alarm, to put smart policies in place, to speed our transition to a clean energy future, and to stop power plants from emitting millions of tons of dangerous global warming pollution into our air. I will tell you, in Massachusetts, that's been a very good thing. Our economy has grown while we've reduced greenhouse gas emissions and boosted clean power and efficiency. We're home to a state with an $11 billion clean energy industry that employs nearly 100,000 people. Last year, clean energy accounted for 15% of New England's power production. Our energy efficiency programs have delivered $12.5 billion in benefits since 2008 and are expected to provide another $8 billion over the next 3 years. For the past 5 years, Massachusetts has also been ranked #1 in the country for energy efficiency. So we know what's possible, we know what progress looks like, but none of us can do it alone. That's why we're here today. We have much work to do, but when we act and we act together, we know we can accomplish much. By quick, aggressive action, educating the public, holding accountable those who have needed to be held accountable for far too long, I know we will do what we need to do to address climate change and to work for a better future. So I thank A.G. Snyderman for gathering us here today and for my fellow attorneys generals and their continued effort in this important fight. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. This is not a situation where financial damages alone can deal with the problem. We have to change conduct. And as the Vice President indicated, other places in the world are moving more rapidly towards renewables. There is an effort to slow that process down in the United States. We have to get back on that path if we're going to save the planet, and that's ultimately what we're here for.
All right, we're out of time, unfortunately. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.